Welcome, income hackers. This is your host, Ryan G. Wright. This podcast is for individuals and families who are interested in fast tracking their financial success. You'll hear experts discussing topics like generating a residual cash flow, building wealth through real estate, financial literacy, creating a family legacy, and overcoming your fears. If you get value out of this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It's a big help to me. All right, income hackers, I have an amazing guest with me today. I am so thrilled. We are privileged to have Jeff Rose with us today. If you don't know Jeff Rose, he's amazing. He has a YouTube channel called Wealth Hacker, which you can see why we like each other just because of that. He also has Good Financial Sense is his website and blog, which you've got to check out. Jeff is a certified financial planner. He's also written a book, The Soldier of Finance. He's the father of four. He is an Iraqi combat veteran. He has been voted by Investopedia as one of the top financial advisors of 2019. He currently writes for Forbes, Business Insider, Entrepreneur Inc. magazine. The list goes on and on. Jeff, thanks for being here, man.
It's a mouthful, right?
And I skipped half of it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, super excited. So Jeff, let's talk about this. You've got these income accelerators. They're thinking, well, I guess we should probably talk your story just for a minute. I mean, you're a normal guy. You dropped out of college, made it through high school, dropped out of college with some debt. I mean, you're a normal guy. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought that up because I think for me, sometimes I have to remember that, but also too, having four young kids and also my passion goes to those that kind of like the underdogs, like those that have like a chip on their shoulder that, I didn't come from money. My parents divorced when I was young. Both my parents, independent of each other, filed bankruptcy, not once, but twice. And that was not coordinated by any stretch. So you can only imagine the money lessons that were passed down onto me. I can actually remember my dad, like one of his money advices to me was when I wanted a new TV, a flat screen TV, his advice was, hey, you can go open a credit card with 0% interest and go buy that TV. Luckily, I did not follow that advice, even though it was super tempting. But with all that advice I had, I ended up taking out student loans. But I didn't have to because the military actually paid for all of my school and then some. But I wanted to buy things and go out to eat and go on spring break and hang out with my friends in college. So I maxed out my student loans for 2 or 3 years, took out some credit cards, and was definitely on the same path of financial destruction that my dad and my mom both went down.
And funny enough, none of that money went towards college because you were able to get the loans, you got the loans, you spent it for some fun. And then you had to figure out how to pay the price of that.
Then I had to figure that out. And it was, luckily I ended up getting a internship at a local investment firm between my junior and senior year. That internship turned into a part-time job my senior year of college. That part-time job turned into a job offer as a junior broker, which initially I turned down, but eventually accepted when there was nothing else out there. This was going back to the 2001, right after 9/11, really, when a lot of people probably remember the 2008 financial crisis. Going back even then, there was no job market. So I took a job that I didn't really fully understand, being a junior broker, and it was by far one of the best things that ever happened. I ended up learning more about investing, even though my major was finance. But I didn't know anything about mutual funds. I didn't really know much about the stock market. Up until then, I really hadn't made an investment. And just by being exposed to the industry, understanding investing, that's where I started to learn. And along the way, it was starting to meet with people that were, dear Lord, like 3 times my age at the time. These were all like folks hoping to retire, wanting to retire. And I just remember one couple in particular, they were in their early 60s, husband and wife hated their jobs. They came to me and they wanted to quit. They wanted to quit. They wanted to retire and be done. And looking at their financial situation, I felt like I was the Grim Reaper, the bearer of bad news. I had to tell them, sorry, like you can't, like you just don't have enough. You know, you have Social Security, you got like $30,000 in savings, like it's just not going to cut it. And in that, I'll never forget that experience, because when I saw them, and especially when they left, just how dejected and depressed that they were, it's like I almost saw my dad in them. And I saw like how much he was struggling with his financial situation. You know, retirement wasn't even in his vocabulary. So I just remember that, because that's when I began this mission of, one, I want to invest, I want to save, you know, like I want to have a different life. Two, I want to show as many people that are willing to listen to start investing for themselves, so that they don't end up like this couple or like my dad. And that just became this mission. And this is all before blogging, this is before social media. But I began like doing seminars. I began teaching at like this local park district, like basics of investing. I started the stock market game at the local high school, you know, like with juniors and seniors, just because like I was super passionate about helping anybody that was younger that was willing to listen, starting to invest. And when I eventually discovered the blog and what blogging was, and realized the potential reach, you know, what a blog could do, that was kind of like the part of the next chapter of my journey in my life. You know, so I was a financial planner for 16 years. Along the way, started the blog, Good Financial Sense, during, that would have been, went back in 2008 when that happened. But yeah, so I say was a financial planner because I sold that business about, I think, just over 2 years ago, and now fully focusing on the online side. So I've got the blog, got the YouTube channel, also podcast, and as they say, living the dream.
That's awesome. What I think is really important for our listeners to understand there is the journey kind of started not by you said no to the job, and then you ended up taking the job because you couldn't find anything else. But that was like a pivotal moment in your life's journey that kind of got you on a different path. Do you think you'd be doing what you're doing today if it wasn't for being in that firm?
If it wasn't for, no, absolutely not. Like my ambition, my dream, and once again, like I didn't have any real mentors. I didn't have anybody in our family or even distant family that really had any wealth. I didn't even know what wealthy really meant, you know.
Yeah.
Like my first car was a 96 Geo Storm that I had to share with my stepsister. Like that was that's what I grew up with. And yeah, so if it wasn't for that internship, yeah, because like my dream was riding the corporate ladder. You know, I was going to work 60, 80 hours a week, and that's all I really knew at the time.
Just be a grinder.
Just do the grind. And thank goodness that the job market shrank. And also too, like full disclaimer, my starting salary, base salary was $18,500. And then I would split commissions 50-50. So like that's how much I was making my first year.
Yeah.
And I think even after I split commissions, I think my gross was like 23,000.
Well, I just
that is not living the dream.
I just really want to point out that, like, regardless of where you find yourself or what circumstances you find yourself in, like, make the most of whatever it is. So like your job, you took it, you made the most out of it, and it put you on a career path that went a completely different direction. And that's one of the things people, hey, I want to be where you are at, Ryan, you know, that type of stuff. I'm like, apply yourself in everything you do. Doors open, decide which doors to take and go all in, you know, and it just happens. So I really appreciate that. So, well, that's awesome. And your tours in Iraq, thanks for your service. Really appreciate it. My brother's actually getting deployed as we speak. So that's I really appreciate your service there, and for all the other veterans that are listening with us. Let's talk about these income accelerators. These are things people can do. You've got 5 of them we're going to talk about today. Let's talk about that first one.
Yeah, one thing I kind of want to start off with, and I'd be curious if you have like a similar experience, but I know like with my financial planning business, you know, from there when I started the side hustle, which was my blog. I also attempted a lot of other side hustles before that one finally worked out. But in my experience, what I've seen with a lot of people that are interested in like starting like a side gig, side hustle, side business, that you have to spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, and it may be quite a while before you actually make any money. And I know like for me doing my blog, it was 9 months of putting 20, 30 hours a week in before I finally even saw a dime. And I've talked to so many others that, you know, are successful entrepreneurs that they had to go through this similar stage, which I refer to as the BMW stage. And this is not you're driving a Series 5, like a used BMW or even a BMW at all. You know, this is basically what I call the below minimum wage stage. And there are so many people that, and I bring this up because I've seen so many people that either can't or are unwilling to stay in that BMW stage. Like, oh, it's just, they stop the grind, they give up. And maybe it's a healthy pivot, but I see so many that just aren't willing to stay there. And I'm grateful because like the difference for me was I just had this, call it faith, call it hope, call it stupidity, call it denial, call it what you will. But, you know, with the blog, when I started this, you know, I just felt like, man, there is something bigger than me here. And, you know, the focus for me was always that education. How can I help others? How can I help others? How can I help others? And that's what allowed me to get through that. But man, if I would have given up 6 months into it, 7 months into it, even that first 9 months, I think I mentioned last time we chatted, you know, the very first check that I made from this online business after 9 months was $152.91. So I went back and calculated what my hourly rate was for that 9 months. And it was about 16 cents an hour is how much I was making for this side hustle, this side gig. And I bring this up too, because I can go back in the day and, you know, my wife didn't really know what I was doing. Like, you know, she thought like, that's cool. That's, you know, bless your heart. That's precious. Other friends, other family members had no idea what I was doing. And for 9 months, I really had nothing to share of like, hey, this is what it's doing. This is what it did. It's like, no, I'm just doing this thing. I published this post and look, 15 people read it. Woo. Yeah. Probably 14 of those were bots.
Yeah. Well, let's break this down though. So I love this BMW below minimum wage thing, but that's like the whole idea of an investment, right? Like I put a lot in with the hopes that I'll get something out in the future. You may be putting money, you may be, like in your case, you put in a lot of time to get the hopes. What I want to know is like, how did you have the vision, and like, what did your wife say 5 months in when you haven't even made a check yet? Like, how did you keep going through that? You know, month 5, you've been grinding. I don't know, was this, how many hours a week do you think you were spending on it?
Oh, I mean, between researching like blogging and search SEO, search engine optimization, and just other blogs and how they're writing, and also writing myself, because like I was fingers to keyboard pecking away trying to write good content. So there's no doubt that I was spending minimum 20 hours. I'm sure sometimes 30 to 40 hours, because it was evenings, it was weekends, you know. And I will say one thing that I didn't allow myself to do was spend a lot of money on things that I really didn't understand. That's something that I could easily do. And I think just because I really didn't know what I was doing, so I wasn't going to go out and spend several $1,000s like on a website design. I mean, it was very much like just shoestring budget. So I was very cautious like that. And I think that was more to honor my wife. Plus, we weren't making a ton of money at the time. You know, I had some extra money that I could have put into it. But like, I think I spent maybe a couple $100 like in the first 3 months on a website design that was like, you know, some site, I forgot where I bought it from. But I didn't spend a lot of money, and I didn't allow myself to get too crazy. And there was like this weird, this is one of the weird times where like I really, really wanted to know it. Like I really wanted to learn it. And there are other situations where I can delegate, outsource, or just know enough. But there was something about this where I felt like I just needed to know. Yeah, so like that, I hope that really answered your question, but I gave myself some limits, some boundaries on like how much I could spend or invest on it. And the rest of it was like, man, I'm just determined to figure this out.
Well, I think it's important because along the journey, when you're grinding or trying to invest or build something, there's a lot of people that want to sell you an easy button. Buy this, it'll fix all your problems. Do this, it'll fix all your problems. You got to be careful with those, along the way, because you can spend a lot of money and not get the results you may be looking for. So that's awesome. Let's talk about your second one. I love this BMW thing. Let's talk about your second one.
So that was kind of like a precursor into the income accelerators, right? Like there's this certain stage that most people have to go to or have to go through, excuse me. So as far as like income accelerators, things that I can look back on my own life and my own journey that have really accelerated, how much I make or how much I currently or have made. And the first one is relationships. And I mean, right here, this is investing into relationship, doing this podcast interview, getting introduction to you and just making this time to be on your show, but also get to learn, more about you and your business and what you're doing. And, one of the things that I've always, and I'm sure you probably, hopefully some people can appreciate this. I get emails all the time about, hey, can you review my book? Like people will send me their book, which I mean, I am an author, like I've written my own book and I know how much time and energy it took, to writing, like my life's work or partial life's work, but it took a lot of time and energy. But the last thing that I'm going to do is send this book to a complete stranger who I have zero relationship with and expect them to take 2 to 3 hours out of their week or month or whatever and then publish a written blog post or a podcast or a video on said book, and when we've never had a conversation.
Yeah.
Like that is not giving any sort of goodwill. There's not giving any sort of value. So one of the things that I've just always learned is, like give before you're willing to ask. And that's easier to do. I mean, I think it's easier to do in the offline world, but in the online world, it can be very tricky. So like one of the things I did in the beginning, relationship building was, writing guest posts for other blogs, but I didn't just send a cold email. I mean, I'm sorry, I did a few times if it was needed, but most of the time, the way that I gave value first was, back in the day, you would go in and you would leave thoughtful comments on people's blog posts saying, hey, I read this blog post, great job, blah, blah, really loved how you said this, da, 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 da. Or sharing that blog post on Twitter or Facebook and then tagging, that blogger. Or if you're writing a guest post for another site, mentioning this other blogger or this other person that you want to connect with in this article, and then letting them know on Twitter or wherever social media platform they hang out to let them know, hey, I mentioned you in this article, in case you want to check it out. Like that, those are just little buckets of investing value, like you're just making these little small deposits into that bank. And that is something that can just pay off huge. So that's just one way with relationships. But in Facebook groups, you can give value by either, if people have a question, answering those questions, oftentimes, or even getting on a call with them, like a Zoom call, Skype call, however you want to do it. Another relationship building, which I can say this with more confidence now. Now I feel like that the whole pandemic COVID is passing. But conferences, attending conferences in person has been one of the biggest relationship building experiences. FinCon, which I think that's where we didn't actually meet directly, but how we indirectly met. FinCon is a financial blogger conference, and that is a conference that I have made so many connections. And actually, that's where I connected with my current business partners, because I gave a talk at a FinCon, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, and a member of their team was in attendance of my talk, and that's how we got connected. So that's just one of many examples of relationships that I've been able to build, through networking, conferences, and all that good stuff.
I love it. I just couldn't help but think of this idea of giving first and how that actually relates, not just in business relationships, but also in family relationships and kids and everything else like that. Like let's seek to give first before we ask, in our interpersonal relationships as well. I think it's a beautiful principle.
Yes. And people don't do it enough. And I sometimes almost feel guilty. Like when I need something from somebody and I recognize, oh man, like I really haven't given them any value. But it's like, I always address that head on. It's like, hey, I really, really need this. Blah, blah, blah. Like, is there any way I can help you out? Let me know. Like, here's some things I was thinking about. You know, I might be able to return that favor. At least you're like thinking about it, you know, as opposed to like, let me know what I can do. Or maybe there's actually a few things that you can offer to show that you've actually thought about a way that you might be able to return that favor.
Yeah, that's awesome. Fantastic. What's our next accelerator?
Yeah. So for me, accelerated learning. I look back on, I look back on the blog. And for those that get blogging, I wish I could tell the story in a shorter context where it really makes sense. But let me just say this. I was switching from like one website design, one theme to another theme, and I didn't really know how to do it. So I did it, I thought was the easiest, fastest way. And this way took me almost an entire weekend, and I am not exaggerating. And knowing what I know now, that whole process should have taken me about 7 minutes. And, oh, I just remember my mom was in town visiting. She was watching my oldest son at the time, and I was sitting behind my computer for an entire weekend for something that should have taken me 7 minutes. If I was either willing to outsource it, delegate it. At that time, though, there really wasn't like YouTube videos on how to do all this stuff, but accelerated learning. How can you learn a skill in a super fast time frame? And for me, you know, I've just always been an avid reader, and not because my parents were readers. It's just because I remember somebody who was very successful, somebody who I admired and looked up to, them always saying like how many books they always read. And okay, they read books, I'll read books. So I just started reading books on mostly entrepreneurship. Like that's where I really got excited. You know, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk. Comes to mind. There's what's it, 10X Rule, Grant Cardone's a newer one that I read. Oh, actually, hold on. I forgot. I keep my top 10 books
on the shelf behind you.
Chris Guillebeau's $100 Startup. You got Dave Ramsey, Total Money Makeover. But I have like if I was in my other office, like you see all these books that I have, and my kids are always like, "Dad, did you really read all of those?" I was like, okay, technically no, but I read 70% of them.
Yeah.
And I have learned so much. And I know it's funny talking to like the younger generation, like, oh, well, you know, there's YouTube, like you can go watch YouTube, which I agree, like that could be accelerated learning. But there's something about reading a book, and that could either be Audible, like I love Audible, but there's something about where you don't have your phone, where you don't have any other distractions that are going to interrupt, you know, you listening or digesting what the author is sharing. And then that also then allows you to think about in your own life, your own experience, what you could be doing or what you could be changing. And that's just something that you don't get, you know, by, from my opinion, like watching YouTube, because, you know, you could go to YouTube to learn about coding, and next thing you know, you're watching like Saturday Night Live skits. Like that's what happens to me, at least. Or you're watching Dude Perfect or whatever. But courses or books, podcasts, and another big one is courses. And it's so funny because I know, at least in the YouTube world, I see so many people that bash courses because, yes, there are a ton of bad courses out there. And I look back at the courses that I have bought, and for me, it was always, I'm buying a course when I have hit a point in my business where, man, I just want to know how to do that. And I don't want to try to figure that on my own. Like, I don't want to spend an entire weekend trying to figure out how to update a website, a WordPress theme like I did years ago. And it was a couple of years ago, a fairly recent example was, so I've been doing YouTube for longer than I want to admit. And I had taken a break, and I think it was almost like 9 months to a year. And I was like, all right, I want to get back into this. And prior to that, I had hired a professional videographer. They came to my house. We knocked out like 12 videos, like in a half a day. I spent all this money, and 11 out of those 12 videos were like, they just fell flat. Didn't get a lot of views. And I just was like, man, this sucks. Like, crap. So I took a break, came back, and I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this again, I want to make sure that I do it right. So I started looking at some YouTube creators and found a course that I felt like, hey, this kind of aligns with what I want to do, what I'm thinking about doing. And at that time, like that course was like $3,500, which that's a very premium course, and spent or invested the $3,500. And the first couple videos that I published, like I think that first video now has over 2 million views. The first one has, or second one's like over 1 million. And I mean, that $3,500 like was well worth it. And had I not, I would have spent, who knows, another 9 months like trying to figure it out. And who knows how much on editing and time and all that stuff. So for me, like courses, as long as if there's a specific skill set that you're trying to learn, and you can define what that is, because I know sometimes I've been guilty of like, ooh, that course sounds cool. That course sounds fun. Like, oh, I can make an extra $1,000 doing whatever, Instagram ads. Oh yeah. You know, like, and you realize, wait, I don't even like Instagram.
Yeah.
You know, like, so like there is that temptation, because like there are some great sales pages, there are some great sales videos that will give you, get you hooked in. And I will say, I bought a few courses that sounded really great, and I'm sure that they were, but the truth is, like, I wasn't at that stage in my life or my business where I had time to focus and dedicate. But to me, like courses, and you don't have to spend $3,500. There are, one of the very first courses I ever bought was a YouTube course, funny enough, since we're on that topic. And that one was only $97. And that one also, like at that time where I was at, that gave me a ton of value. That was like the basic introduction to YouTube and how to, I didn't even know how to do a blurry background, like on cameras, but with that course, like I learned thumbnails and descriptions and all that stuff. So just depends on what you're trying to learn.
Well, I think quality advice is always worth, as long as it's what you're going after. Like you're talking about, don't get distracted with other things, and make sure it's going to be quality content, quality advice that you're going after, and know the source that's coming from. I think it makes a lot of sense. If you can find somebody that's a few steps ahead of you and you can follow that path, that they've already been there, done that, it saves you so much time. So I love it. What's number 3?
So number 3, this is one that this is like very popular nowadays, and it has been popular for a while, but it is a mastermind group of some kind. And it's funny because I'm curious, when you talk to people, maybe those that are new to business, do you ever get like the raised eyebrow, like mastermind group? Like, what's a mastermind group? And that's one of the things like I take for granted, because going back in the day, I remember the first time I heard of like a mastermind group, I'm thinking, okay, what is this cult thing that you're a part of? And when I finally learned like what the concept was, basically you're just looking for like-minded individuals that, you can be either in the same business or you can be in a different business. But generally, you're all about at a similar stage in business. Maybe you have a few that are a couple steps ahead of you. Maybe you have a few that are a couple steps behind, but you don't want anybody that's too far ahead or too far behind. So you're kind of at similar stages, and this can happen however way you want to do it. The very first group I was a part of, we had a call. We had like a conference. Somebody had a conference line where we call like every Monday. I think it was like at 3 o'clock, and it was an hour call. And there was 5 of us in this mastermind group. And the format was, you had the first, I think it was 15 minutes, was a quick introduction of, hey, what's a big win for the week? What are you working on? What are you excited about? Just kind of share like what's going on. And then the rest of the call, one of those 5 people had what we called a dedicated hot seat, where you would come with what is a problem, what is a concern, or hey, here's an idea that I have about launching this product, about launching a new YouTube channel or a podcast or whatever it may be. And you just kind of put it out there to get some feedback from this peer group that you have been a part of, either for, could be a short amount of time, or now, like, that mastermind group, we were together for almost 2 years. So they got to know me, my struggles, my challenges, and they had a good sense of what were some of the common pitfalls that I would find myself into, and they could just speak a lot of truth into my life, and that was so valuable. And the cool thing about a mastermind group is they can be free. If you find the right people, it can be free. I will say that the ones that were paid, with the exception of that one, were a little more, when people had skin in the game, they were willing to show up. And I will say the main reason why this one really, really worked is because you had some really high achievers in this group, where if you didn't show up, like eventually you're going to get kicked out. So you had to show up. But I've been a part of other mastermind groups that are free, and oh, I can't make it today, I'm too busy or whatever. And I get it, life happens. You got kids, I mean, life does happen, but you want other peers in this mastermind group that are making this a priority.
Yeah,
That that they're going to show up, that they're willing to be there, be present, and help you out as much as you are there to help them out. So
yeah, I totally agree.
That's huge.
One of the masterminds I'm a part of, if you show up late, you owe $50. If you don't show up, you owe 150. We haven't had anybody miss in like 5 years. The last time somebody missed, they were on their phone and their wife called and said, "I'm giving birth right now. Come to the hospital." Like that's the last miss we've had in my mastermind group. That's the last miss. And of course we're like, yes, you need to go. She wasn't due for a couple of weeks. She went into labor prematurely, and they end up having the baby that night. It's like, that's pretty cool. So cool. Yeah. What's number 4?
So number 4 is another one that was really hard for me to understand. And it's personal coaching, business coaching. And I can remember the advisor that hired me back in the day, that made me that first offer as a junior broker. At some point, he told me how he had hired 2 coaches, like for his business. And like, I'm like, what do you mean you hired a coach? Like, because I didn't know there was such thing as a business coach. And he's like, he just made the analogy. He's like, hey, if Tiger Woods needs to work on his golf shot, he's going to hire a coach to show him how to do it. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Like, I don't know if I'll ever do that, but that sounds really, really cool. And then it was about 5 years into growing my business, I felt like I just hit this, ceiling where I was making really, really good money, but there was like the purpose and the passion. I just felt like I was going through the motions, and getting this. Actually, a guy who found my blog contacted me. We ended up having a good chat, and we talked for like an hour, hung up, calls me back. He's like, hey, I was just thinking, something you said that really struck a nerve with me. It's like, hey, I want to tell you about this coaching program. And he introduced me to what was called the Strategic Coach. And at that time, I think it was like $8,000 for this coaching program. And once again, I had never invested anything close to that. And I was like, but there was something about he said, and just about the timing of it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. Like, I will do it. And so over the next 3 years, I was in that coaching program. Actually did it for 5 years, but for the next 3 years, it was like almost 30 grand that I invested into this coaching program. And my revenue went from $250,000 a year to almost $750,000 in that 3-year stretch. And like, that's one of those times where, people ask, well, what's the ROI on reading a book? Or what's the ROI on listening to a podcast or buying a course? And sometimes that's hard to calculate. And with this, it was like, okay, here's the ROI. And the funny thing though, with that coaching program, in the very first year of doing it, my revenue a year later was pretty much flat. Like, it hadn't grown anything. But that first year was me rewiring how I approached my business. I was retweaking, restructuring, just trying to retrain myself on how I was doing things. So after I finally got through that, and then like, we went from implementation, and then also then we get to execution, it just took off. And so like, coaching, having somebody that's going to hold you accountable, that's going to show you things that you can't see yourself. And that's where a coach is. I just mentioned to you, I think before I hit record, my oldest son, he's on the golf team, or he's trying out for the golf team. He was on the middle school team. And, when he's shanking a shot or missing a putt, I can see as his coach, I'm like, hey, your feet are, you're not lined up properly, or, you're lifting your head, or you're not doing this. He can't feel it. He can't see it, but that's where a coach can come in and give you a different perspective. And it only takes usually one small little tweak. It can have a huge impact on not only your business, but also your personal life.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so true. It's the blind spots in your life, right? You just can't see it, but somebody else can. So obviously, so I love it. I love it. What's number 5?
So the last one, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, and this is one I get a lot on the YouTube channel, and it is finding a mentor. And this can be challenging. I think most people usually attack it wrong, or they have this belief that at first, like you need like a physical person that's going to put their arm around you, and come to your house and tell you what to do each and every day. And that might be the case in some cases. I feel like that's more like some sort of like Hallmark movie, but a mentor at first, it could be an author, and not because like you're having lunch with them or having coffee, but it's because you're reading their book, you're listening to their podcast. If they have a course, you're buying their course. And one of them, I've had several mentors along the way. The financial advisor that hired me, he was definitely one of my first mentors. Later on, it was Michael Hyatt. He was a mentor of mine for quite some time. He's actually based out of the Nashville area here. One of the reasons why I moved here, but he was always somebody I admired and looked up to, not just for his business life, but also his personal life. It seemed like outside looking in that, he had a good marriage, he had a big family. And, so I bought his books. I listened to his podcast. I bought a few of his courses. And then when he had an inner circle mastermind group open up, I ended up leaving the other coaching program and spent or invested the 25 grand to be in this mastermind with him. And just to get that experience. And the cool thing was like, yeah, he is the same guy that you would think, outside looking in, like he is a family man, like he does have a good marriage, and like just the way that his balance of his business and personal life is just amazing. But like you mentioned earlier, trying to find somebody that's just a few steps ahead of you is all you need. And I would say if there's no one in the online space, but looking like now that you can actually hopefully go have a cup of coffee with somebody or have a meal with somebody, is like reach out to them and say, hey, you are somebody that I really admire, I look up to, as far as like what your accomplishments in business. I'm really excited about where I'm at in my journey. It would be so helpful if I could just get 30 minutes just to learn more about you and what you do, and like what were the keys to your success. And if I could just treat you to a cup of coffee or lunch, like that would just mean the world to me. And like that is one way that you can do it when you really have nothing to give, and that just comes across more genuine, like showing that you really admire this person. And generally, I mean, you're stroking the ego a little bit, you're making them feel good.
Everybody likes that.
But as opposed to like, oh man, like I want to take you to lunch because I want to know what you do and how you do it. And that's a really bad example, but I've had other examples of people reaching out to me as if like I had the keys to success. I was just going to give them. And generally when you get those requests, it sounds like they want the shortcut that there is like no work involved.
Yeah.
And that's the best way I can explain it. But for somebody that actually has given, like they admire you, they look up to you. I mean, generally, like if you have the time and like you want to help these people, because you can tell like there is a passion there. Like there is something about just their motivation and what they want to accomplish. And when you reach a point when you can give back, like I enjoy doing that, if somebody is genuine and really wants and is seeking help.
Well, I remember when I was first starting in real estate, there's some book that was like never eat lunch alone, right? It's like always have lunch with somebody else. And I think the investment I made in buying somebody else lunch probably paid me the biggest ROIs, because I'd learned something or get a few steps ahead. And it's like, it's worth it, it's worth buying people lunches to learn from them, to make the relationship, which kind of back to your first point we talked about in making those close relationships and interpersonal. But I don't think there's ever been a time where it's easier to find great mentors. I love your principle of mentorship, where it's like you can have mentors that you've never even met because you follow everything they do with podcasts and YouTube and everything else. Like you can legitimately say, this guy's my mentor, but I've never met him and he's never met me, but I follow exactly what he's doing. If you choose the right person to follow in their footsteps, you're going to have great success. You're going to have good things will happen if you choose the right mentor and actually do the thing they say. But one of the big things there is you got to do the work, right? You got to put in the time. You got to make it happen. There's no, overnight successes usually are 10 years in the making, is the thing I see quite commonly.
I just tell you a quick story about a mentor. David Bach, New York Times bestselling author. I think he's hit like the list like 9 times or 11 or 15. I don't know how many it is. I first read his book when I was deployed to Iraq, and I read his book, Automatic Millionaire. I mean, I think I read that like in a day or two. And then this is before I wrote my book. And anytime somebody came to me, because everybody knew I was a financial advisor, while I was deployed, said, hey, I want to read a book on personal finance investing. What's a good one? I'm like, hey, you need to check out this book, Automatic Millionaire. I just read it. It's really, really good. And I read another book of his, I listened to some of his podcasts. And then I think it was like 3 years ago, he was the keynote speaker at FinCon. And I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. I'm actually going to get a chance to meet him. And, he was taking interview requests for anybody that wanted to. And I'm like, heck yeah. So I went to interview him for my podcast. And I also found out along the way that he was in the Strategic Coach, the same coaching program that I was in. So he was really good friends with Dan Sullivan, the founder of that program. So I got a chance to interview him there. And when we just started talking, he's like, oh my gosh, like there were just so many similarities, in our journeys and what we do. And to where like now he's actually living in Italy, and like we've had phone conversations, like we have our numbers, like he's texted me. So it went from like this, I admire this guy, he's a mentor of mine, like almost like he's untouchable, to like, oh, he's actually a friend of mine and I can reach out to him, if I have any questions about business or personal life, like, and that's just because I looked up to him. I read his books. I had a chance to showcase, his work, show my appreciation and gratitude for what he's done. And now it's like, now I have that personal relationship, which is kind of cool. And I still have yet to really ask him for anything, but it's like one of those, hey, I have put in the time and the energy. So like, if I ever have something, like I know that he'd be willing to support it. But that just shows you like, you can have a mentor that you never talk to, and you might have that chance one day where that mentor becomes a real life person that ends up becoming a close friend.
Well, the crazy thing about this story is it like sums up all your 5 points we've been talking about, right? Like you found him as a mentor, you built the relationship by giving, you accelerated learning by following the things that he talked about. Maybe he wasn't in a mastermind, but I mean, come on, like it's kind of the culmination of all those things. And then to have that happen on the other side where you build that relationship is just incredible. So
cool.
I love it. These are fantastic steps. I think I had the opportunity to meet Larry Miller, who I live in Utah. He's a local guy. He bought the Utah Jazz, brought him here in big car dealership. And when I was in high school, I got to go lunch with him. And I said, what's the secret to success, right? I won an entrepreneur thing when I was in high school. And so I got to do lunch, and I'm like, what's the secret to success? And I brought like a big notepad, and I'm like, I'm going to be writing all this stuff. And he said 3 things. He said, show up on time, and show up prepared. If you show up, you'll beat out 70 or 80% of your competition. If you show up on time, you'll beat out the other 50% of your competition. And if you show up on time and show up prepared, you'll beat 95% of your competition, and you only have 5% to deal with. And that's a coin toss. You win half of them anyway. So good luck, kid. And I just was like, are you kidding me? Like, I want the secret to success. This guy owns an NBA team. He started as a local boy with nothing and grew to there. I'm like, what's the secret to success? And I know a lot of income hackers may be listening and be like, Jeff, like, I want the secrets to success. And I'm saying Jeff just outlaid them. This is the relationships, the accelerated learning, the mastermind, the business coaching, the finding the mentor. Those things we just talked about are the secret to success. They take a lot of work. They take a lot of effort. They take some planning. They don't have to be expensive, although there may be some investments along the way, but that is the secret to success. There's the secret to success is followed by a road of a lot of work and a lot of effort. And I think another secret with Jeff that we haven't talked about yet is just his passion, right? He's got a lot of passion for finance and really wants to see people achieve that and get to the other side of things and find that, good financial sense to use your blog. There's a lot of passion behind that. And I think that if you don't have passion behind what you're doing, if money's the only motivator to get you there, it's only going to go so far. There's got to be a deeper passion to get there. You've got to love other things about that aspect, or you're going to fail you're in the middle of your 9-month BMW phase below minimum wage. You're never going to make it. You've got to have that passion. The tenacity will get you so far, but you've got to have a little passion around it as well. So, I think we need to add a passion to your to your thing as well. But any thoughts, Jeff?
No, I think you're absolutely right, because I didn't highlight, there were so many things, road bumps along the way that didn't feel like road bumps. They felt like craters. They felt like roadside bombs that, with growing the blog and just getting hit by like Google algorithm updates, where seeing my traffic drop by 75% overnight and not having any idea how to fix it. So there's all these different things that happened along the way that I easily could have just threw up my hands and said, screw it. I don't know how to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know how to figure it out. Woe is me. And I had to go back and remind myself, like, why am I doing this? Like, what is the whole point? And yes, I would like to make some money. That's great. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, I really want to help people. Like, I really want to help people. There are other people out there that are a similar journey, that could end up like my dad, who, when he passed away, had a negative net worth. He passed away with credit card debt. And just that passion was like, if I can prevent more of those stories from happening, like that's what's going to keep me going. And that's so that was like, and that really has been and still is a part of my journey. But like, now that I have 4 kids, it's like, now it also becomes I don't want them to become like my dad. What can I do to prevent that with them? And also, I guess, all of their friends and all their acquaintances along the way. So it's kind of like this multi-generational, like, all right, it started with my dad and now it's on to my kids as well, which is an entirely different journey, because, like, now my kids are being raised in a $1 million home. So it's like, how do I teach them how to work hard to get to that BMW stage? So that's where, like, there's chores and there's household duties they have to do. I had my middle son, he was out like picking up rocks in our backyard when it was like 85 degrees. And I just love it.
You're smiling.
I just love it, because I want them to feel that and to know what hard work is. Because right now, what they see, like, they don't see their dad driving the 1998 Chevy Lumina, when he started his career. They don't see their dad working nights and weekends. They see their dad playing golf and laying by the pool and, recording some YouTube videos every now and again. So it's like, I'm constantly reminding them, or having to remind them of my story and where I came from. Because when I told them about my first check that I made, which was from Google, my Google AdSense check, the $152 check, I told them, like, hey, your dad worked for 9 months. I was doing this and this and this. Do you know how much I made? And one was like, you made 10,000. The other one was like 100,000. I'm like, no, $152. They're like, what? Why? Like, what are you doing? What were you doing wrong? I'm like, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just trying to figure it out.
I was building.
This is how much time I spent. So, and I'm sure they probably retain like 15% of that story. So it's just something that I'll have to reinforce and reinforce and reinforce again and again. So it's just taking that to YouTube and the blog and the podcast and everywhere else.
Well, one of the things I think about quite often is you're going to be uncomfortable either way. Like, putting that time in through the BMW stage is uncomfortable, but not having financial success is also very uncomfortable. So it's like, you've got to get okay with discomfort. And I'd much rather have proactive discomfort moving in the right direction than I would have reactive discomfort of dealing with the problems that come from not living life by design. And that's one of the big things we talk about all the time, is a life by design, not by default, right? If you don't design your life, your life will be decided for by other people, and you will become part of their design, because the people that design life are the ones that take control of that, and the ones that don't end up following into somebody else's design. So life by design, not by default, I think is just huge, and getting okay with the discomfort, and rather have proactive discomfort than reactive discomfort, because it's painful either way.
I've actually never heard that proactive discomfort. Like I love that. I wrote that down.
Awesome.
It's so good.
I mean, that's everything to me. If Jeff Rose writes down a phrase I say, I'm like, yes, that's huge. All right, man. Well, let's do a quick wrap up here. What's your favorite book? You've told us a couple of them, but if we had to boil that down, what would you say?
Yeah, like the book that I always tell people to read first, a book that I'm having my kids read is Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. Just because of the mindset shift, like that for me it just showed me how to think differently. You know, there wasn't really a lot of strategies there, but it just showed me that the way that I'm thinking, the way that I'm approaching things is not how he did. And it worked out for him. I mean, I guess we could probably argue that back and forth, you know, some of the negative press that he does get, but either way, going back then, you know, like I didn't have any wealthy people, any wealthy mentors, didn't have any rich people. So it just had me start asking different questions. And that was a big part of my journey.
That's awesome. What's your favorite phone app?
Phone app. I'd have to go Audible.
Nice.
The fact that I can listen to books while I'm going on a jog, taking my puppies on a walk, while I'm in my car. That is one of the ways that I'm able to read like 2-3 books a month right now with 4 kids. So yeah, I absolutely love Audible.
That's incredible. Jeff, other than checking out Good Financial Sense, how do you want to have people reach you or reach out to you? Or also Wealth Hacker on YouTube. Any other way you want people to check you out?
Yeah, like you said, Wealth Hacker on YouTube. You can also just search Jeff Rose. You'll find me. Probably the social media platform I'm most active on is Twitter, and that is at JJeffRose. JJeff, 2 J's. There was a Jeff Rose in Canada that took the, he got me, beat me to the punch on that one. So yeah, at JJeffRose on Twitter and also Instagram.
Fantastic. Okay, income hackers, now is the time. Take something that you've learned and take action on it. Now's the time to take some massive action towards one step. What's the next step on your journey that gets you a little bit closer? Some of the things that Jeff talked about today, focus on one of those, take some actions in the right direction, and we'll see you next time. If you got value out of our discussion today, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It's a big help to me. Also, please share with a friend. Nothing is more valuable than creating financial friends who are like-minded. You can do that by inviting them to listen to the Income Hacker podcast. Bye for now, and make it a very profitable day.